You are listening to the We Hired a Sitter for This podcast.
We hired a sitter for this.
We have a roster of like 7 sitters.
I'm spending $3,000 on paints.
Do you go to therapy?
Never have, nah.
There was a small fire. I put it out.
Real talk, the stakes are too high with my baby.
Comedy, parenting, married, life.
We do it all.
I'm a dad and I'm busy.
I have an opinion. I don't know if it'll be right, but
I'm Patrick.
my name is Gaston.
We hired a sitter.
All right, everybody. Welcome to We Hired a Sitter for This, episode 147. Oh man, I just uploaded the latest one. I should check this. I should check it, but I should also embrace the unexpected. So this might be 147 or 148. I should check it. I shouldn't start podcasts. So
I say start however, you give a little bit of surprise to the audience.
I like that too. Let's roll with this. I'm not going to edit. Luke.
It's 140-ish something.
Yeah, somewhere in the 140s.
Somewhere between 140 and 150.
I've been wanting to have you on the podcast since episode about 116, actually, because I really slacked off. It's exactly a year ago. Last August, we were working together at the Laugh Tour Comedy Club in New Jersey.
Oh, yes.
And I've always seen you do such funny material about fatherhood and family. And I've always thought, I got to get this guy Luke on there. And I don't know if you even remember me asking you about that in Jersey. But you're finally here in the 140s, 147 or 148, whichever episode we're on, you're here. Luke Thayer, everybody. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you having me on. Yes, I don't know that I necessarily remember the Laugh Tour conversation.
Yeah.
We worked together in Colorado.
Yeah.
And so I kind of assumed it must have been we had a conversation about it there. But that was much more recent than the Laugh Tour would have been.
Just March. We got to work together in Boulder, Colorado at the Comic Sense Comedy Room, which is about the size of my apartment.
It's maybe a little bit. Well, the shape is a little different, but it's right around that.
And it's a fun comedy room. It's in a little spooky basement in the bottom of a hotel that's been there for I don't know, a couple hundred years or something.
Yeah, it definitely has to be haunted. It feels like it's one of those hotels.
Totally.
Where they're like, well, let's go ahead and renovate it and make it look a little more modern and hip, and we'll make it almost like a speakeasy.
Yes.
And you're like, yeah, but that ghost has actually been here since speakeasies were an actual thing.
They're pre-Prohibition era ghosts, wasted on moonshine, just stumbling around in the dark.
Bathtub gin, that's probably how they went.
Yeah. So Luke Thayer, he's a comic. He's a dad. Married to a comic. Who's your wife again?
Abby Crutchfield.
Yes, hilarious power couple in comedy. 8-year-old kid.
6.
I'm making stuff up.
I
can't get any numbers right on this episode.
You're not even. Yeah, that's what's going to be the title of this episode. Is incorrect numbers.
I like it. Every week when I post an episode, I need to come up with some kind of pithy title for it, and it's always the last thing. My least favorite part of the process, because I'm like burnt out. I've done all this video and audio editing. I just want to get it up, and then my creativity just peters out, and I don't know what to call these things. So incorrect numbers is the name of this episode. So thank you for that. I'm glad you're here. I wanted to talk about a few things with you. First thing that's fresh on my mind. So I a few weeks ago, I was upstate working some brewery shows, and I'm doing an hour on stage, and I want to know what's wrong with me.
Okay, is that the question?
What is wrong with me? I'm going to give you more information. So when I'm doing an hour in an alternative space, it's very rare that you could just do prepared material that people will calmly listen to and enjoy as you go, because there's so many distractions. One show, it was daylight, and it was quite bright in the showroom. It's 7:30 p.m. Beautiful summer day. People don't want to be in the room. They'd rather be outside drinking, and they're distracted. And so I can't just do my hour. I got to do a lot of harnessing attention. I've got to get the people who are concerned about the tap in the back of the space, whatever. I'm trying to think of what the other distractions were. The sun was in people's eyes. That was one thing that was really distracting for a lot of people. there's chatter. It's not a showroom. People are not sat like it's a showroom in a comedy club. It's just tables in random places in this warehouse space. And what I do to regain attention anytime I feel like it's dwindling and I'm losing them is I'll riff on the room or whatever's happening or what that guy looks like or what's their relation. I'll do a little crowd work. But I keep falling into this trap that I feel like I need to ask you about of getting way too dirty and way too crass and vulgar, and I go for cheap laughs. And you are a person with a dry bar special. Is it a dry bar special?
It is, yes.
You've got a dry bar special. You talk about your faith on stage. You talk about being from Indiana. You're what people would say is a clean comic. I don't know if you identify as a clean comic, but
I work clean.
Yeah, you work clean. Why can't I just be a nice boy on stage?
Well, I think you probably would have to look at what are your motivations with that.
Yeah.
With any material, and I would include crowd work in that, ad-libbing, riffing. What's the intention behind it? If the intention is to make people laugh and it makes people laugh, well, then you have accomplished your goal.
Yeah.
So I don't know that clean or dirty. I don't know that there is a superior anything. I know there's someone like Jerry Seinfeld would say, yes, clean is superior.
Yeah.
It is harder. So therefore, to make people laugh is hard. Clean is superior. But I'm not 100%. My mind is 100% clean or something like that. But in terms of laughter, I feel like I'm pretty decent at making people laugh with clean jokes.
Yeah.
And
I will verify that since you're going to be modest.
Yeah.
Luke is a certified killer in comedy rooms. I watched you all weekend in Boulder kill all those shows. You also are able to do that while riffing and doing crowd work. You keep it clean. And I think there's a thing you do that many clean comics are able to do, where you can create something that feels a little risque or edgy or whatever, or just risky in general, that makes people just as compelled to listen as anything I might say about who's banging who at this table. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I interrupted. I really interrupted to say that you're a killer.
Well, look, if you want to interrupt and say positive things about me and my act.
Well, let me stop you there. Yeah. He's incredibly handsome, very tall, very fit. This is a very fit man in my home right now. That's going to be my next thing is how do you as a dad stay in shape? Because that's a whole other problem.
That's a whole other thing. And we might have to change the name of this episode from incorrect numbers to fit dad.
Yeah. Or Luke saves Patrick's life.
Yes. This is, or just, the incredible Luke. So we can do that too. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Yes. I don't think that clean equals funny or dirty equals funny.
Right.
So I put work into crafting things and let my mind wander and be silly, and also, I think that's funny, or I think that's comedians in general. I think that we just have a different outlook on the world to begin with. Some comedians, I think, don't allow themselves to dive into that different outlook on the world. And sometimes I don't allow myself. Sometimes I do something that I would call simpler or more relatable.
Yeah.
Even though I don't find it as interesting. Like talking about going to the gym or something like that. But those things are starting to fade from my act to be, where it's like, if I need it, I'll use it for something. If I think, man, I know this crowd, they will like this joke, and I will leave them with that kind of taste in their mouth. Let them enjoy that. And I don't put value judgments on laughs necessarily. You could be stupid. You could be corny. You can be intelligent. You can be all of the things. You can be dirty. You can be clean. If you're making people laugh, that's kind of the point of comedy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that makes me feel good because I
Yeah.
don't ever feel like I'm doing things repeated. Of course, there will be like a crass joke that doesn't get the response that I want, and that's a bummer. But I don't. Luckily, I know to pull back or not do that repeatedly. And I think like at most of the shows I'm referring to from a few weeks ago, anytime I did feel myself getting a little bit obnoxious or crude or vulgar, it typically led to a snowball effect of laughter, and then I could get back to my material. So I think I'm not totally going in the wrong direction. I guess I just would like. I think I need to challenge myself to tread a little, find a little bit more delicacy in there.
Well, part of it too might be with each comic, there's a certain voice, a certain essence of who the comic is. And there are some people that their essence on stage does not lend itself to being dirty.
Right.
I don't, Nate Bargatze is an example of somebody who's very clean with his act. But even his essence, I don't know that it would necessarily lend itself to being dirty, or mean. Like he's not a mean comic either. Right. And so I don't know that it would necessarily lend itself to that. It's like he's found that voice that works very well for him and who he is as a person, especially on stage. Jim Gaffigan's another one. He's actually a comic who I have heard him speak on being clean versus being dirty, is that he was not always a clean comic, but he was doing jokes about bacon and, just talking about that, and he'd be doing 5 minutes, 10 minutes on food and bacon and Hot Pockets. And then he would do a joke after that was about donkey sex or something like that. And he goes, it's such a turn of like everything we're talking about that's very difficult to do that. And he found the food material more interesting and more of what he liked writing about than just this joke. So like, with your material, if it's a really left turn to then just start being dirty over here, you can do that. But in some ways, is that taking away from who you are as a comic on stage and who your material actually is?
That's interesting.
Because you don't want to paint yourself in that corner with the dirty material of going like, not material, but riffing of like, okay, I've gone over here. Because once you kind of go that direction, it's not that you can't come back. Because I've heard some comics be like, it must be so hard being clean after following dirty comics. And it's like, not necessarily. Yeah. I think that my goal was just to be as funny or funnier than any dirty comic so that when I'm at Gotham or any place else, it doesn't matter who I follow. Yeah. I'm going to be funny being me and doing my stuff. Yeah. And so, but if I started doing that within my own act, that might be a little more difficult to go back to talking about parenting after I just did, I'll use Jim Gaffigan as an example, a donkey sex joke. Right.
Let me ask you this. So speaking of parenting, a parent of a 6-year-old, I have a 4-year-old, so I'm a little newer at this. They will eventually find our stuff, right? If it's on the internet, it's on the internet forever. I'm about to, I think later this summer, there's a podcast show I did. It's a storytelling show where I told a very personal sex-related story. And I had to make that decision before I agreed to signing the contract for it. Am I okay with my kid hearing this one day? And I have to, like, I do this a lot where I have to remind myself, I am a 43-year-old man. I'm allowed to say and do whatever I want on stage. I can be responsible for it. People may have judgments or feelings about it, but I get to do this, right? The one person I worry about is my kid. Like, what is it going to be like when she says, hey, my friends showed me this thing at school, or I stumbled upon this thing. So I guess I'm curious to ask you, how nice is it to feel like you don't really have to worry about that in a real, I don't know.
Yeah, what I worry about isn't that she's going to find something dirty. it's more of like anything I talk about with parenting, you know, because are there, if she found something at 16 about when she was 6, I think that she would be more developmentally capable of understanding, like, he's just making a joke about what it was like to parent when I was 3 or 4 or 5, you know? Yeah. But I don't ever want to have her hear a joke now that would cause her to think I don't like being her dad. Yeah. And so, because I have I'll use like just a very simple example. Is like I have just a joke that like dads, before you're about to have a kid, they love telling you like, oh, you're gonna love this baby more than you love anything else in your life. You know, it's gonna change who you are. And I'm like, well, I got Xbox Live, so like, give me a minute. Let me meet her first. Yeah. I mean adults, we can all see that. You know, I'm joking here. Yeah. I don't know that a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old, if she heard that, would be like, so do you like being my dad?
Are video games better than me? Yeah.
And I think I could explain that to her. So, I mean, I guess there is the bright side of like, yeah, she's not going to be hearing like filthy stories about all the times her dad was, you know, gross or whatever. Right. Ever.
Actually, that's not a bad album title for me. Yeah. Filthy things about all the times as a dad I was gross.
Yes. There you go.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. You don't like titles. I'm just giving you a bunch of titles.
This is all about titles.
And so, in fact, that's now the name of the episode, all about titles. Yeah. And so,
or it's called Untitled.
Untitled.
Number 147 or 148, whatever it is.
That's the full thing. Yeah. With the question mark, all of that. Yes. So but I didn't start doing clean comedy or being clean on stage because of that. I never anticipated that because, you know, I wasn't ever sure I was going to be a dad. And so I just try to think about it. I was in comedy, you know, from my first open mic till I had her was something like 13, 14 years.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So it was like, I was just worried about being funny and getting better and getting work and making a living and, you know, all of the things that we hope for in comedy.
I mean, I've heard it is a easier way to make a living to be a clean comic who is in demand because there's so few people who are out there. I guess now, not. I mean, if you look at the Dry Bar page, there's dozens and dozens of hilarious clean comics. So it's almost like the responsible parenting decision to say, okay, I'm going to figure out how to work clean.
I wish that there was just an easy formula and that was it. Just work clean and then you get more work. Yeah. I would say I have gotten work, you know, because of being a clean comic, but then there's also other things where it's like, there is certain things, connotations that I think people are expecting with clean comedy. So like, let's just say cruise ships or certain corporate work. I don't even think that they want clean comedy. I think they want it to be clean, but I think they want safe, corny comedy.
Yeah, like comedy that's not going to get a negative review on their website.
They want something safe. And so I would not say that I am the most safe comic.
Yeah, I will say I found a lot of your material to be edgy in the religion department. Sort of toying with religious themes that you grew up around and pushing back against certain things and questioning certain things. Is that what you're referring to? Is that the stuff that may not feel safe to certain markets? I think
that there is just a series of jokes that I have, like just a little spin that I will put on certain things. That, I mean, yes, the church jokes, I think, you know, I did a cruise ship once, and after my first set, they said, hey, let's just not do the church jokes. And I was like, well, it's all about just me and my experience. My dad was a preacher. I'm just saying this. Like, I'm not, you know, I've had people hear these jokes and have, at the same exact show, I've had people say, I love how you bashed church and Christians. And I've had other people come up and say, I love how you defended church and Christians. so people are bringing their own ideas to these a lot of times. So like, I don't think I'm ever disrespectful with anything. I think that I play around with things. I do have what I call gentle roasting of people and things. But I'm trying to think of like, let's say maybe another example of something that like, talking about my parents being old and joking about being my mom's last egg. That stuff is not dirty, but it makes people a little more uncomfortable in certain settings where they're like, oh, this is not necessarily him just talking about a trip to McDonald's or something like that.
Like we didn't want him to come here and talk about this, body autonomy stuff. Like not even directly about that, but it reminds people about these kinds of debates, and they probably prefer it not come up at all. For their audience, whatever those venues or groups are that have those complaints.
It is. It's something like, I have a joke about everybody gets one good grandma and one bad grandma, and I kind of go through it. And even though that should be completely, it is completely clean, but it still can kind of make people like, well, are you making fun of, old people, grandmas? And it's like, well, sort of. I'm poking fun at the idea there. Yeah. And not everybody has had that experience, but a lot of people have had that experience, so it's relatable. But it's, when people talk about edgy, a lot of times when they say edgy, I think they are only referring to, they're using it synonymously with dirty. Yeah. And I don't think so. I think there's a lot of edgy comics that are corny. Yeah. And they are not edgy at all. They're not pushing the boundary of anything. Right. They are sometimes just straight up hacks. Yes. I'm not trying to paint that as a broad stroke of all dirty comics. It's just there are dirty comics, and so to say you're edgy, it's like you're dirty, but you're not edgy. You're not pushing any boundaries. Right. So I like long ago somebody said, you're so clean, but I feel like you're edgier than just clean. I go, well, I think of it like a box. There's a lot of edges. Right. So like, it's not just some line, and edge is far over to the right, and that's it. It's like, no, there's over to the left, there's up, there's down. There's like, you can be edgy in a lot of different ways. Yeah. If you think of it in terms of like, I just want to push some boundaries. Then there are other jokes of mine that aren't pushing any boundaries whatsoever. Right. It's just talking about an experience or observation, Yeah.
I think I'm so curious, like what growing up around a church does for a mind like yours, for the comic mind that you talked about earlier. We just think about things a little differently, or we examine things a little more closely. So a lot of people's whole comedic career is a reaction to authority in general. So with growing up around church with a dad who's a preacher, like, do you think you were sort of seeking out those edges as a kid before you were even thinking about it in terms of jokes or anything like that? Were you just kind of always thinking about the logic of what you were hearing, or feeling doubts about what you were hearing? I don't know. Like,
well, I do think that played a part into it, because my dad, the way he taught me in terms of Christian belief, in terms of Bible, is that you follow, like, if you're following Jesus, you follow what the Bible says. Mm-hmm. And he goes, all the extra stuff that people make up around that is not the same thing as following what the Bible says.
And what branch, do you say branches?
Well, I think the
denomination.
The common term would be denomination, but we actually were a non-denominational Christian church.
Okay, cool.
And just to explain that for people that do not know what that means, a denomination would be something like Methodist, I guess technically you could say Catholic, but
Army, Marines, Navy, yeah, those branches.
Anybody that plays each other in football, that's what you got. So they typically are connected throughout let's just use the United States. Yeah. So like their Methodist might have a overall branching off an organization. So there's a hierarchy. Yeah. There's an overall, I don't want to say company, but there's like an overall head that you report
Yeah,
to?
I grew up in a Methodist church. I just went to a Methodist service 2 weekends ago, actually. Outdoor service. Pastor Choi killed it. Pastor Choi, I found out, he's the new pastor in my mom's church. He's headlining 3 shows a weekend for 3 different Methodist churches in their area.
Good gig if you can get it.
I assume, or it's like
I
really
bet he's working
hard.
clean too.
He's
so.
working clean. He's playing the electronic drums every show, along with my sister who's in the choir. The choir is very small. It's my sister, one other person on a piano, whoever wants to sing from the pews, Pastor Choi on drum set. But he's
That's a band. That's not a choir. That's,
yeah, that's just like a garage rock
yes.
band. But he's doing that service at I think 11 at my mom's church. Then he goes over to Bowlville, does a noon or 12:30 show, and there's one other one. And I'm like, the Methodists need more headliners for their roster.
Maybe they're getting a little thin. It's in demand. It's an in-demand profession, maybe. So that's an example, though. Like, he's connected to these other churches probably through the Methodist organization.
Yeah.
So he's probably, I don't know if he's assigned, I don't know every denomination's process, but a Catholic church is kind of an easy one, even though I have very little experience with them, but I at least kind of understand their organizational process a little bit. Is like, obviously the Pope is the top dog other than Jesus, I guess.
Yeah.
But then they start hiring, cardinals and bishops, and then they get down to
It's a whole chess set.
Yes, the fathers at the places, and the priests, and they can be moved, they can be reassigned.
Yeah.
A non-denominational independent Christian church is there. There's none of that.
Yeah.
You don't report to any place else. It's that church, that community.
It's an island.
It's an island. You might work with other independent churches. You might gather. You might have a potluck with them. There is a convention every year, gathering of all the independent Christian churches.
You ever worked those?
I have not, but I was. My name was put in for that before my pastor's father-in-law worked on the board of that convention and was like, I'm going to put you and your wife's name into try. I've been trying to get you in, guys. And that's
do you have a church here?
We do. We are attending a church in Park Slope. So
cool. Non-denominational, or did you pick a branch?
Well, let me just say, like, I kind of switching over from a church that kind of it kind of fizzled out through the pandemic, which a lot of churches did. So that was a church plant. Just means like, another church planted something there, but it was from an independent church, yes. And so I was there for a lot of years, and then it kind of has dissolved, and so just started attending another one. Yeah,
and I'm just curious about this stuff because it's rare to meet people in our age group that are like, I go to church. I bring my family to church. It's part of my social life. In New York City, I mean, where I'm just from 80 miles north of here, and that's a lot of people's day-to-day life. I mean, my family, like I just said. So I hope it's okay to ask about.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I love hearing about it. I'm incredibly lucky. I share openly about being in 12-step recovery. So like I essentially have a church. I go to lots of churches to go to my meetings, and I think it gives me everything people get from church. It's community and communing with a higher power, and I talk about God. I don't know exactly what God is, but I talk about God and gods and goddesses and whatever, and the universe to lots of different people. Often it's service work, helping others. It's all these things, and I'm so grateful to have it. And when I think about people that don't have something like that, I always wonder, like, why don't you join a church? Like, that sounds like a great way to have like a consistent thing where you're kind of in touch with these, like, I don't know, bigger thoughts about life in general. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, but it's hard to answer for other people. But for one, like, I know you talked about 12-step on stage. Yeah. Because that gave me an idea for an addition to one of my jokes. Oh, nice. I think it was when we were in Colorado, because I've said a lot of times I will just ask an audience just a little bit, like, before I do some church jokes, like, are you churchy people? Like, and so after years, I think I ad-libbed
come on, guys. I know a lot of you look like you were in 12-step programs. So I know you've been in a church basement. I think it's you guys ever been in a church basement? I feel like you guys, a lot of you are 12-step programs. So I know you've been in a church basement. And it was based on your talking about it on stage. Cause like, man, that is a lot. They meet in church basements a lot.
Yeah.
And so, but in terms of like letting other people or other people, why don't they get a church, man? There's 1,000 different reasons, and you could have a lot of people on, but there are people who, I have a comic, I won't call him out because it's his story to tell, but his father was abusive. And so he's an atheist because he's like, I can't even picture a God that will allow this guy to happen. So they don't want anything to do with that. Although he had considered, there are atheist churches that exist, I guess. I don't know what you call it, but they basically do the typical Sunday service. They just leave God out of it. It's difficult for me to make that kind of leap. Sure. Because I'm like, all of that stuff doesn't really mean much to me if there is not a God, but that's not my
and to
decision.
be clear, you're into a Christian God, Jesus, etc.
Yes. Yeah. So
I love that, just like Jesus, etc.
Jesus, etc. I mean,
you're like, no, just the most important thing in my spiritual life.
I think that by definition, a Christian is supposed to be a follower of Jesus. So like a disciple of him, meaning like I view him as the teacher and I follow that path, right? Which can manifest itself in a lot of different ways for people. Obviously. There are a lot of people that have a problem with church, and I've talked about that in jokes. You've not heard some of these jokes because I haven't told some of these in a while, but I've gone through like who might have a problem with church. Sometimes there's a money thing. Sometimes there's they feel like a discrimination thing. Just going through some of those things, and so everybody that doesn't want anything to do with church, usually there is some sort of reason, but could be 1,000 different reasons why.
But what is it? How does it? What does life look like for you in Brooklyn, raising a young family, interracial marriage, church as community? Are you guys going weekly? Does your daughter have a connection to it? How does it enhance your life as parents?
Yes, and everybody has probably their own parenting thoughts on this, but my daughter at one point, because pandemic stuff, nobody was really going to church.
Right.
I mean, we did some Zoom church stuff, but that is a very different thing because it's almost like you've taken out the most important aspect, which is the community. Because you want friendships, you want gathering, you want to meet people. You have the same thing with even like a 12-step program. Why does that work so well? Because there's a community. You have actual human beings that you're sharing energy with in a room.
Sure.
Versus, I'm logging on and I am, seeing a screen, and even though there's some sort of connection, it's not the same. And
I would argue that the computer and the internet is whatever the opposite of God's love is. Like it
certainly contains a lot of it's Satan. That's who that is. That's the devil's work right there. That's why
do we think the devil's real?
Yes, but do I know fully what that means? Not necessarily. Because do I think it's a pitchforky guy that walks around? No, probably. But the Bible doesn't even really describe him as that. Like it's even sometimes the Bible describes him as the adversary. And so if you just think of it in terms of what is the adversary, man, there's a lot of ways that could be, again, to use the term, manifesting itself in the world towards another human being, man. There's a lot of adversarial energy going on.
I was just going to say, like, there are things I've done in my life that I don't think it was a little dude on my shoulder saying, let's be bad, but it is a uncontrollable subconscious pull and draw and almost, or sometimes it feels like a push, like just like this like subconscious feeling of, fuck it, I'm doing it anyway. And I deserve this. And just like in program, I guess it would be talked about in terms of taking one's will back, where it's like, I'm just going to do what feels good for me right now, instant gratification, reason be damned, loved ones be damned, etc. And I can see how it makes sense to talk about in terms of that's the devil, that's Satan.
Look, I have had the same compulsions, particularly towards Ben and Jerry's, and cookies. Man, I don't want to minimize people's experiences, but I have not ever done drugs. I very rarely even have a drink of anything.
Yeah.
I just don't even like alcohol. I don't like the taste.
Good for you.
I don't drink coffee. I don't like the taste.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not like a Jehovah's Witness or a Mormon or something like that. I can't have caffeine or something like that. But I'm just like, I don't fully understand pushy, like just making your body take in something that you don't even like. Also, just you called me fit earlier, but man, it's like always a struggle because I was an overweight kid, and I have that tendency as an adult too to drift into that. So just even the idea of using up any of my calories on alcohol is just like, I can't. I'd rather have this ice cream. And so, but I do struggle with food compulsion, like overeating, and so as destructive as drugs and alcohol can be for people, that's why I didn't want to minimize it. But I'm sure I understand what that compulsion is of I have to do this. Screw it. I'm having this now. I'm going to have, 10,000 calories of ice cream in the middle of the night.
Yeah. Yeah. I, just, since we're here and talking about this, I'll update the listener. I have one listener. Today is day 62 of no junk food for me.
Oh, nice.
Counting days on it. I hit a rock bottom again with ice cream is my drug of choice in sobriety. And, I'm happy that if I get to bed tonight without eating junk food, it'll be day 62.
That's very awesome. Yeah.
So it is almost a satanic urge when I do want to just binge on junk food. It is totally like, I just don't care. I don't want to feel how I'm feeling, whether it's sometimes it's honestly like extreme happiness. Like I had a great night of shows. I deserve this. Let's celebrate. Let's just pour a huge Burger King milkshake on this. I deserve to enhance this feeling. Or if it's the opposite of the night, I had a rough night on stage or a fight with my wife or whatever, let's go numb those feelings with Drake's cakes, cookies,
exactly,
Milano mint Milanos. Those oval Milanos.
There's not gonna be a cookie that you mentioned that I don't know.
Yeah, those bad boys, the mint ones. It feels like you're eating something that's good for you. It's like so refreshing, but it's chocolatey. And it's just it's like, well, I'm halfway through the bag. I might as well finish it.
Shoot, I have a joke. I don't even know if you've heard it before, but like, it's one of those that's kind of drifting out of the act. But I just said, I have eaten an entire box of Girl Scout Thin Mint cookies at once, not one at a time. I crumbled them all up into a bowl, poured milk on it like a bowl of cereal.
Oh, that is nice.
That is a true story. In fact, I used to do that with Oreos because those dissolve very quickly. But I also did the...
it's just a cookie slurry.
Yes. And I would oftentimes... I say bowl, but really what I would do is, those... particularly when we were kids... McDonald's used to do giant cups, and they put like Batman on the side, or they would put the Dream Team. I had those size cups. I would fill them with cookies and then pour it out with milk and then stir it all around. And so it was it wasn't as thick as a milkshake, but it was very much. That's got to be, what is that? 6,000 calories. I'm
just
down in
pure sugar, and it makes me think like so. So your mentality around drugs and alcohol and coffee, just like a very rational thing of like, I don't like how this tastes. I don't really love how it makes me feel. I'm just not going to do that. That sounds very like healthy and grounded and possibly based in being raised around. I assume your relationship with your dad is a good one, the way you've talked about him.
Yes. Yeah, it is good. Like, he's much older than a typical parent in our demographic.
Oh, interesting.
He just turned 87 years old.
Wow.
And that's kind of where the joke came from, like, as my mom's last egg, is that they were older parents, because I have siblings that are I have 3 siblings that are much older than me.
Okay. You're the baby.
I'm the baby. The closest one in me to age is 14 years older than me.
Whoa.
And so, yeah, just imagine in 10 years having another child, and that would be the closest in age.
Well, I don't know where the non-denominational Christians stand on this, but I got the procedure done, so it would be quite a miracle. It'd be another religious miracle if my wife got pregnant.
Well, my dad would call that's a matter of opinion. The Bible doesn't speak on that, so that's a matter of opinion.
See, I like that. Yeah. I like where your dad's at. Like, he's going to the source. What did Jesus say? What did Jesus teach?
Yes.
That's great.
Yeah. And
he's like, skip the editorials. We don't read the editorials in the Bible.
Yeah, those things can provide some benefit, but it can't be a demand of others.
Yeah.
So like he always said there's essentials and there's opinions. Yeah. Essentials are, what does the actual Bible say? So like if you're going to be a Christian, you're going to follow Jesus and say he's the Son of God, well, you got to believe it, Son of God, right?
Yeah.
You got to believe it existed. That's one of those essential things to be a Christian. Otherwise, you've moved out of Christian to just a broader sense of spiritual.
Yeah.
Which is a thing, but it's not being a Christian.
Yeah.
But there's things like, should you get a vasectomy or not? Well, that Bible doesn't talk about that. So then it becomes opinion, And
they didn't even know how babies were made back then. Yeah. They didn't know how it was happening.
They had no clue on a lot of things. But yeah.
Well, before I forget, what I want to get to about the religion and being grounded, being raised that way by parents who sound reasonable, is the drugs and alcohol and coffee, etc. Just sort of, you knew it wasn't for you, so I can just proceed with my life and have a nice life without indulging in these things. But I wonder if the sugar stuff is some kind of a safe way of acting out as a young person in a structured religious environment. Like, did that ever become like a secretive thrill? Like, I'm always curious about the thrill-seeking behavior of addiction type stuff. Like, I'm going to go get high. Like, you're not rationally thinking about this, but it's like, I'm going to get high with some sugar right now, and it's my little thing, and I get to do this, and nobody has to know. But it's also sort of within the bounds of being a young, healthy Christian kid.
Yeah, I don't know, because thinking about that, like, it was kind of open, but I'm from Indiana, and so eating it's not necessarily frowned upon. Like sugar and things are not necessarily, they're not the devil there. Yeah. So, because my mom would buy me ice cream, and at different points in my life too, my activity level was so high. Playing basketball through like high school and college. I mean, I didn't play for the college team, but like, I would play in with scrimmage with the team and stuff. So, but I was playing basketball every day of my life, and I was running and lifting weights. And so I would eat, they had the slow churned ice cream, the Edie's ice cream. And I always thought, well, that's that's less calories. So, it doesn't count. But I would eat half and at that time they were still doing half gallons.
Right.
So I would eat a quarter of a gallon of ice cream every night.
Yeah.
And it wasn't affecting my physique per se because I was burning so many calories. But my mom would just buy all the ice cream and just let me eat a gallon of ice cream every 4 days. Yeah. And the cookies, dumping the cookies in the milk and things.
I mean, as a parent, I'm sort of like, well, that's a lot of calcium. He's got growing bones. He needs his calcium somehow. Let's give him some Edie's.
Yeah, and I mean, this kind of gets into nutrition and a broader discussion about like what the country is. But my parents, I think, are of a generation, because they're technically in what I think is called the lost generation. So there's the greatest generation. Those are the people that fought in World War II. Right. Then there's the baby boomers that were born once those people came back from
children, war. Yeah.
But my parents were born in 37, 40.
Yeah.
And that's in between. So they were born and way too young to be in war. Right. But they weren't born after the baby boom.
Yeah,
so
that's
that
interesting.
1945 to like 1952 or something like that is when you had to be born to be in the baby boom, or 55. And there aren't that. So they're what's called the lost generation. And so, but baby boomers, they're close enough to the baby boomer age that the way that I think junk food and fast food and TV dinners and all of that in growing portions as the country got richer. And this,
I was going to say they're also depression era. Like
Yes.
there's some like depression stuff in there.
they were technically born when the depression was still going on. We didn't really break out of that until wartime.
Yeah.
So there is, I think, food isn't a bad thing. The ease, the access.
I was going to say,
things,
like, fast food was sort of the wave of the future.
Mhm.
It was almost probably a wonder that you could just go anywhere and get any kind of food quickly.
Yes.
And it wasn't about getting the ingredients off the land
Yes.
or the grocer or whatever.
Mhm.
And like, I can see it's sort of like, this is our right to eat like this. Of course we should eat like this.
Yeah, cheap, readily available. Now, that does not account for like getting a cheeseburger at McDonald's in 1960 is a very different thing than getting a meal at McDonald's now.
There's different chemical compounds that didn't
and
even exist back then.
Even just the size difference. Like if you really saw what a meal for an adult man, you or my height size, it's the regular cheeseburger with a small fry, and that's a full meal's worth of calories.
Yes.
Nobody eats that. So so I think that because of that, I don't think they restricted my calorie. The one thing that they did not allow me to do was to have a lot of sugary drinks.
Yeah.
So we had Diet Coke instead of Coke. And we had, I got Kool-Aid maybe 3 times in my entire childhood that my mom made it. And whatever the sugar amount was, she halved it.
Yeah. I was going to say, I can remember making pictures of Kool-Aid, and it's kind of crazy to think of what a cup of sugar looks like.
Yes.
You're just like dumping it in there and then dissolving it.
Yeah.
It's like, that's all in there.
And think about that is in every Coke, that is in, every Mountain Dew, whatever,
Yeah, I luckily soda never became a full-on addiction for me, but I do, like, I haven't had soda in 62 days now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's nothing better than like salty Mexican food just chased with like really good, like a big tall glass of Coca-Cola.
Oh yeah.
Ice. Like that's the best. You got me thinking about something else. So aging parents, how is everybody's health?
They're still kicking. They've had health scares over the past, I'll just say a number of years. It's, obviously once you start to get in your 70s and 80s, there's going to be health complications. But they both have had things where it was like, I'm not sure they're going to survive much longer.
Yeah.
And then they have, through surgeries, through different things. And so, but they are not independently living anymore. They live with my sister. I think they probably could still live home as long as somebody's, around and checking in on them. But
and if they're 87, they're people of faith. I assume they got married young. How long have these people been married?
My mom was 19.
Wow.
And my dad was 23, I believe. 22, 23.
So we're talking 64, at least 64 years of marriage?
Oh, yeah.
Is that the math?
Yeah, I think they're somewhere at least 64 years of marriage.
That is wild. Yeah. So, and does Abby come from a similar background? Is she from a religious family?
It's a very different background.
Yeah.
So, not to tell all of her story for her, but like her parents were together. Her mom was raised Catholic, but really had kind of not done the Catholic thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then took Abby as a sister to church for a little bit, probably like a non-denominational Christian church for a little bit. So like at a certain point in their life, maybe in her teen years, she's got some family members on her mom's side that are Christian. And so they like went to a Christian camp and things. And so she's had Christian influences, but certainly not like having a preacher in the house. Yeah.
But I just think of a young, hip Brooklyn couple working in entertainment, nightlife, comedy. You'll be I assume you would like to also be married for 64 years.
Let me do the math. Do I want to be married 64 years? No. Like it's well, you know, I'd love to live that long.
Yeah.
You know, I got married later than my parents did. Also my siblings all got married very young.
Yeah.
19, 20. I think 20 was the oldest. And I was 29 when I got married. So like it was kind of like, is this guy ever going to get married? You know, it's a very Midwestern
That's hilarious
thing, you know. And so and then
I was
having
30,
kids, you know.
I was 36 or 37.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Midwestern influence. That I mean, what do they think of you living in New York City as a comedian?
Well, I can tell you, I think they're all. I have a very large family because, you know, I have the 3 siblings, but then they all have kids.
Yeah,
and so several of those kids are closer to my age than my siblings. So, the closest one being like 4 years apart to me. So I feel like my siblings feel like what aunts and uncles feel like to everybody else, and my nieces and nephews feel like cousins. Well, some of them feel like cousins.
Right.
Some of them feel like nieces and nephews because you know, my oldest sister has 6 kids.
Do you have a niece or nephew that's older than you?
No.
Would that even make mathematical sense?
They could have. I mean, you know, let's see. My oldest sister's 18 years older than me, so she had a baby before my mom gave birth to me.
Right.
She would be a very young mom, but she could have technically had a baby my age or a little bit older.
Right.
She didn't, but that could have been a thing. And
then your child, did you have your child at what would be considered for your family an older age?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I'm much closer and not quite as old as my parents were when they had me, but much closer to that than my siblings.
Yeah. Because that's something we keep. We don't occasionally we'll think about, like, you know, my wife was 39 when my daughter was born. I might be wrong. I'm going to get in trouble. But yeah, we are much older than our parents. No, that makes zero sense. My wife is 41 now and she's 4. So she was 37 when my kid was born. Yeah, so I'm preparing for, you know, being a 60-year-old dad of a college freshman, you know, like I'm gonna be tired by then. I'm tired already, so like how does all that look like it's playing out for you guys?
Well, hopefully some of the choices that I am making health wise, activity level, diet will, and also things I don't participate in, like drugs and alcohol, will hopefully lead to longevity and activity level even at a later age. I know my grandpa, you know, I didn't know him super long. He died on my 10th birthday, but he was still playing tennis in his 70s and riding motorcycles and stuff. Yeah. But he's of that generation. He smoked basically his whole life. Yeah. And he also drank, and so like there was a heavy toll on his body, probably from that. He was a little overweight too. But so, and my parents, my dad had been an athlete when he was younger, played football and basketball, played basketball at his small college and things. And so, but I have seen their activity level change over the years, and their diet is very Midwestern. Yeah. And so those things have altered even maybe their longevity, but they're still around in their 80s.
Yeah. I think as you approach 90, it's sort of like, who cares what anybody's doing with their body? Do you need to check that? I think that might be. Yeah, it's not me. It won't pick it up on the mics, and okay. Like I said, we're super casual. So if that seems important, feel free to.
I didn't. Mine was muted. I thought
maybe it could be my computer. Yeah, I don't know. We're hearing sounds in the room. Maybe it's the ghost from Boulder, Colorado. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm just. I think you're just such a great man, and clearly like doing
great man. That's going to the top of the Bible. The bio. You know, like great man.
Yeah. How do you bond with your kid? What are some special things that you, father, daughter, kind of, how do you guys connect?
Oh, there's lots of different stuff we do. She's actually in church camp this week.
Oh, nice.
So during,
it's funny. Last week's episode was about nature camp. Our kid's been going to the public park with a group of kids. There's some caretakers that have a little day camp set up, and my podcast partner was razzing me about sending her to nature camp. Yeah. So I'm curious what he would have to say about church camp, but what's that like?
It's a very simple, just a few 3 hours, and they probably sing some songs, listen to a Bible story, do some crafts, have a snack, and that's pretty much it.
That's so fun.
But other than that, like, that's not a bonding experience for us, but like, because of that, this week I haven't been doing what I've been doing the rest of the summer, which is couple days a week I'm taking her to the public pool.
Oh yeah, nice.
Helping her learn to roller skate. I don't know how to roller skate, but I'm trying to help her learn how to roller skate. Teach her how to ride a bike.
Are you doing blades or quads?
Quads. Yeah.
Wow.
And she's
outdoor.
Outdoor.
Where do you do that?
Just in our neighborhood.
Where can I come get video footage of you on roller skates?
You won't get me on roller skates, but you get her on roller skates. So I just walk next to her.
Oh, gotcha.
I've never had the right balance for that. And so we have a little area in our back. We don't have a yard. Mm-hmm. So instead, our super and our landlord, he owns a bunch of buildings in this kind of industrial area. So there's a back area where it's a loading dock area, but in the evening, nobody's around working, so she just uses it like a little skate rink.
That's fun.
And starting to take her a little further on the in neighborhood walks and go to there's a local playground area nearby.
I love the public pool. We do that a lot too.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, she's learning to like dive a little bit, and
cool.
She's getting comfortable with the water. And we play video games. So
what's she into? Halo?
Well, she's I would play that with her, but she's not
I can't do all those buttons. I peaked during Sega Genesis.
Oh, I love Sega Genesis. I collect a bunch of old video games.
Of course you love Genesis. It's the best chapter of the Bible.
Yes.
Isn't it the opener? Isn't it the opening
it's
chapter?
It's the beginning, yes. Yeah. In the beginning is the very first words in Genesis. So
right.
So she plays Tears of the Kingdom, Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. That's really what she likes to do the most, and Pokemon Snap. But she likes to talk to me, and she likes to talk to Abby about this too, but Abby doesn't have a clue and doesn't really enjoy the discussions about Zelda, but she's got the different monsters that she fights and all that she wants to talk about.
That's cool.
We'll watch movies together. A lot of times I will just fall asleep, but while she's on my lap, we're just laid out on the couch while she's watching. What's like one of the most recent ones that we watched? We watched a bunch of the Pixar movies and things like that.
Yeah, did you go to Inside Out 2 yet?
We did. I took her to the movie. I actually took her. I had some shows, doing some Don't Tell shows in Delaware, Maryland stuff. And so on that weekend, I brought her with me.
Nice.
And one of the things we did was go to Inside Out too.
The three of us went. It was my wife, my kid, and myself. Two of us cried, and it wasn't our kid.
Yeah.
Those movies, they know how to get you.
They do. And those, in particular, Inside Out and Inside Out 2, both of us having daughters.
Yes.
And seeing this maybe from a parental point of view, that changed how I looked at movies in general once I had a baby.
Totally.
Was what actually changed, because they're like, this is going to change you, My joke about having Xbox Live was, but what changed was watching films. So like anytime in a film a kid is hurt or killed, I can't watch those anymore.
Yeah, it's too much. Yeah.
I can't watch any Dateline programs about the missing child or anything. Yeah. It's like it's too close to home now.
I listen to a podcast. I dabble in the true crime genre, and I stumbled on a Reddit thread recently that said, what's the best true crime podcast that's out there? And there's one called Hunting Warhead. And Warhead is a username of a guy who was proliferating child abuse imagery, which I learned from this podcast that you hear people throw around child pornography. The authorities say, don't even call it that. You call it child abuse imagery or child abuse materials.
Okay.
Anyway, it's about these people that track down this guy. And the podcast was so well produced that I couldn't stop listening, but it also made me physically ill every time I was listening to it. I'm like, I can't. and I don't know that I would have that same reaction had I not had my own child. Of course, I would be horrified by it, but yeah, there is something that makes everything so much more visceral and real when it's like you're taking care of this person.
Yeah, once it becomes personal like that, you can have empathy before you have a child, but there is something where it's not just empathy anymore. It's not just, I understand how this person hurts. It's more of like, I feel this in my own child, of a protective nature.
Yeah.
And I could never imagine this happening to her. And I would never want that. And I would never allow it if I have any say in it, you know?
Yeah. I like that in a positive way. In the city environment, we spend a lot of time at the public park and the public pool, like I mentioned. We're around kids from her daycare a lot. Like, we've become friends with other parents. It has been really kind of cool to see how much I connect with other people's children and like care for them. And obviously, I don't care about them the same way I care about my own kid.
Yes.
But I care so much more deeply about small children now. Like, I just feel that protectiveness is kind of going beyond just my own kid. And that's kind of cool, is when you feel like, oh, I'm a parent now, and I've been deputized to be not a protector of the neighborhood or anything like that, but just to be a little bit more responsible than just any other Joe Schmo on the street.
Sure, yeah. Well, you start looking out for things, or you see things and go, oh man, I feel that way even when I see somebody parenting their child extra harshly on the subway or something like that. And I'm just like, man, you don't even realize the damage you're doing in your relationship there, you know? And so,
no, we talk about that a lot. Like, when you just hear somebody just like when I hear somebody cursing at their kid, like with extra like anger in their voice, I'm just like, that poor kid is being beaten down by your words. Like, you might feel really proud that you're not hitting them, but you are like really damaging them by talking like that to them. Yeah. It's tough. Oh, that's one thing I forgot to mention to you is, so my struggle with being rude or crass or using too much vulgarity on stage, I'm actually proud that in my day-to-day life I'm a pretty clean guy, I guess. Like, I don't swear a lot in regular conversation. My wife, on the other hand, she is a self-proclaimed she curses like a sailor, like, and she admits to it. And my kid has recently been using some words. Just the other day, she said, Dada, you don't like fucking? I'm like, what?
In what context?
You don't like fucking?
Yeah.
And I'm like, first of all, I don't say that. But she's saying you don't like the word fucking. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, I don't like that word. A lot of people don't like that word. My wife and I are trying to avoid saying that's a bad word. My wife would prefer we say, you can say that word if you want, but just so you know, we may not be very upset about it, but there are other people out there who will be upset by it, and that might not feel good for you if somebody is upset by something you say. So and that's not what it started with. JFC. She would say Jesus effing, and because that's something that falls out of somebody's mouth in this household. I won't say who. Or just JC in exasperation. It comes out of a woman who lives here's mouth a lot.
Sounds like it's not coming out of two women's mouths in this household.
Yes, exactly. How do you, I mean, I just assume that's not something you're even encountering based on the wholesome home you've created for your child, but have you had to have conversations about bad words or language, or has she ever come home from daycare or school saying, hey, so-and-so said? Yes,
she has. She said that, and that's the thing, I've realized that she figured out some, quote unquote bad words, and that they are bad words, not necessarily from us. So she picked them up somewhere at school or something. Yeah. Not to use the words, but she's like, this person said this word.
Yeah.
And that's a bad word. And I was like, oh, okay. Where'd you hear all that? So I kind of letting her process a lot of that on her own. Okay, I ask questions, and it's I don't know if there's a right or wrong with that. Like, cause you know, I guess like it's kind of like when we were talking about as a comic, is it good or bad to say these things on stage? It's like, I don't know that there's a good or bad to it, but is it beneficial?
Yeah. What's the purpose? What's the intent?
Yeah. What's the intent? What do you get out of it? You know? And so a lot of times people do not get the beneficial outcome that they had hoped for with those things. And so it's like, well, then maybe you want to alter your thought process and behavior on that if you want a different outcome.
Yeah. And it's like, how do you say that? How do I say that to a 4-year-old? Like, you saying that is not making me happy. Is that what you want? You know, like, I don't know. Anyway, I feel like I could pick your brain about this stuff all day, but this has been great and pleasant and informative. Thank you for your time.
We could have just kept going, and this would be 147 and 148.
Yes, that's true. We actually could. But before we end, could you please explain to me and to them so you've got a dry bar special out there. There's an audio album on all the platforms. Where else should people seek you out?
Well, if they just want to know about where I'm going to be, comedianluke.com, that's got a schedule. But also I put up particularly headline dates on my Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all of that. At Comedian Luke is the handle on all of those. You don't even have to remember my last name.
Cool.
But you can, if you just Google it, say Comedian Luke Thayer, Thayer. And there's always something going on. Abby and I had a podcast for a while that still has a bunch of episodes up, and we're kind of on hiatus now, called The Kid Is in School. So it's just a couple of parents talking, just us talking to each other when our child's in school. And YouTube, Comedian Luke Thayer, obviously. Any of those places are great places to find me.
Nice. And what is the most popular Luke chapter of the Bible? Or verse?
Oh boy,
because Luke is a book, right?
It is
in the Bible.
It's one of the Gospels.
Okay,
and so usually people end up quoting more like Matthew.
Okay,
and so
because I guess where I'm going with this is, could you name an album like Luke 3:16 or something?
It could.
Would that be blasphemous?
Obviously, John 3:16 is one of the Gospels, but I could do Luke 3:16. We should look it up. What is Luke 3:16?
Yeah.
You
don't have it memorized? What kind of Christian are you?
It never occurred to me. That's the funny thing. It never once occurred to me. Sometimes you have things that are so obvious and they're right in front of your face and you just never see it. Partly because my name is Luke. And
what is the vibe of the gospel, Luke's gospel? Do you say the Gospel of Luke or...
Yeah, the Gospel according to Luke is one way to say it. Gospel of Luke, the book of Luke.
What was Luke's vibe?
So out of all the Gospels, he was a physician. And so my understanding is it's a little more, what would it be? I don't want to say technical, but it's kind of matter of fact with what was happening. So maybe because it's all about Jesus. That's what the Gospels are. Is like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are all just basically the life of Jesus.
Okay.
And so it's just one point of view. So all the Gospels are very similar. Some have stories that are not in the other ones, but a lot of them have similar stories just from different points of view. So they're talking.
But would it be blasphemous to have an album called The Gospel According to Luke?
I don't think so. In fact, I've thought about that.
I think it's a good title.
Yeah.
Tap into the base, the Christian base.
Yeah, the Gospel of Luke, man. Gospel just means truth. So,
yeah. Well, I feel like we got it today. Maybe that's the title. Maybe this is episode 147 or 148, the Gospel of Luke.
There we go.
Luke Thayer, thanks so much for your time.
Oh, thank you for having me. I wasn't super funny. It was just more of honest.
No. This is what it is. This is a conversation. The show's called We Hired a Sitter for this. So I don't have it right now. My sitter is my mother-in-law. Do you guys rely on babysitters, by the way?
We do have a babysitter that lives in our neighborhood because we don't have any family in New York at all.
Yeah, we're in the same boat. We've talked about this quite a lot. Gastor, my normal co-host, he's got family up and down his block and in his neighborhood. He grew up with a network of aunts and uncles taking care of him, and I gotta push back on him a little bit more often to remind him that us people that came here from other places, we are doing this with a skeleton crew.
Absolutely.
So shout out to your babysitter. God bless them.
Kind of like your podcast setup. It's all you.
Yeah.
You're the editor.
Yeah.
You're the videographer.
Yeah.
You're everything. So.
Yeah. Hopefully I hit record on these before we started. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye-bye.